welcome into another episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. I am Will Thomas, and we have less of a preview video today and more talking about this bill that was introduced in the Senate yesterday, the Protect College Sports Act. If you follow really any media member in college football, you saw things about this bill that Ted Cruz and Maria Cantwell introduced yesterday. Now, this has long been in the works, and it was finally introduced today. Now, yesterday, excuse me. Naturally, it has a long way to go before it could even possibly be actually put into governance. And there's going to be a bunch of amendments. There's going to be a bunch of lobbying. So as it is right now, probably won't be how it looks, even if it does actually get passed. But let's just go through it right now and really talk through what it actually means. Because, generally speaking, people don't associate Congress with college sports at all, which is good. I wish it was that way. But this bill is going to be, if it goes through with these provisions as it is, it's going to really change the sport. And in my opinion, it's for the better. And in some people's opinions, it would be for the worse. But that's what we're talking about, so we can get all that out. So just going through some of the provisions. First off, it protects a lot of NIL rights. And it protects that student athletes will be federally protected too. So on a federal level, to earn money from the NIL deals, have agents or legal representation, just things like that. So that's really just kind of cookie cutter, making sure that players are protected with their NIL deals. And that provision is in there because some of the other parts of this bill they don't really restrict athletes or, limit their freedoms, but they sort of do right now, not really in a harmful way, but that provision in there is really meant to try and give themselves a buffer for some of the future ones here that we'll get to in a second. But the second one is just about the disclosure and transparency about NIL. And all it is that athletes have to disclose NIL agreements that are over $600, which is most of them, within 30 days of being agreement. And schools have to submit anonymized NIL data every single year, which is the compensation range, the number of deals, and the total NIL value sport by sport. So all that is for is just to give more transparency, right? Because right now there's a lot of money. You hear all these rumors about just so much money on so many rosters. This is asking for just more transparency through that. How much money is really being spent by each school? Where is it going? Which sport is it going to? Just that sort of transparency, that degree of disclosure is really important. So that's really that second key provision. Number 3 is a little less. It won't really impact much of the fans, but it regulates the use of agents with players. So this is part of why I think that first provision is so important, because this one can kind of get in the way a little bit, but all it does is that it just regulates athlete agents a little bit more. It requires state registration for an agent to represent a student athlete. It caps the commissions for that agent at 5%. That's also in there to protect players, right? So that the agent can't just come in there and take a bunch of the money. It requires written contracts. You can't, false recruit either a player or them to a different school. You have to be fully transparent. There can't be any real swindling of deals, what gets accepted and what's not. And it allows athletes to sue the agents for violations. So part of that is, part of that provision right there is helping the student athlete, giving them more protections, more freedom, and the other part can sometimes be some things that make it a little bit harder for them. But overall, that agent regulation one is being spun by people who don't like the bill sort of as restrictive for the players. I don't really see it that way. There are some parts that maybe make it a little less easy for players, but overall it makes it much safer and it guarantees them way more money. So I don't really see much of a negative in that one either. The fourth big provision is protections to academic and scholarship situations. So athletic departments, they can't pressure any student athletes into taking, easier majors that will only take up their time. They can't retaliate over any choices that the student athlete makes academically, and they can't block any internships or jobs that the student athlete is pursuing that is outside of their sports. So once again, that's just making sure that the student athletes have the freedom to do what they want to do off the football field, because, for 90+% of them, this is all their football. They need to be ready for life in the future. So this is just making sure that teams can't do anything that would, directly or indirectly prohibit the student athlete from advancing themselves off the football field. And in terms of scholarships, they cannot be reduced or taken away because of bad play, injuries, mental health from a student athlete, or just a roster management decision. So it protects student athletes in terms of, losing their scholarships, because now there's money involved if a player is hurt or they don't pan out to the level of investment. Right now, there's not a whole ton that protects that player from being safe on the team. But now this would do that. So let's say, you break your leg the first year into a $10 million year as a quarterback somewhere, you are protected, you are fine. So that's another player protection part of this bill. And there are just some injury report things in this bill as well. And you just have to, protect the players with medical coverage, injury insurance, things like that. That's pretty standard. This next one is really interesting to me. So they want to create an independent Office of the Student Athlete Ombudsman. And what that will basically do, it's just going to be an agency that is going to help to advise athletes about their own rights, help resolve disputes, whether it's athlete versus school, athlete versus coach, things like that. It's going to provide them with confidential support, right? So it can be private, anonymous feedback that they need if an athlete needs help, and it's going to protect any whistleblowers from negative retaliation. So a lot of this, once again, it's just sort of protecting the student athlete to be free, to not have any pressure on them if something is wrong, just trying to make sure that they're safe. And then coaching transition restrictions. This one's really interesting. This is effectively being dubbed the Lane Kiffin rule. It says that FBS football coaches are going to be restricted from leaving mid-season and immediately acting as a head coach elsewhere during that same season. Now, Lane didn't exactly do that, but he was recruiting for LSU while last year's season was still going on. That would be illegal now. Right, like during the bowl game for LSU, Lane was in the booth. They probably still allow that, but I'm saying that to say that in that time frame, right, he was effectively working for LSU. He was recruiting, he was working the portal. That would be illegal until the season ends, which I think is good, right, because that takes away any real threat of, collusion or tampering, or at least it helps limit tampering because every school tampers, but just with this example, like Lane was in the era of Umami Yellen, TJ Dottery, Winston Watkins, while that season was still going on, and now they're at LSU. So that would just prevent that from happening, at least in theory, right, and try and limit tampering, all this off-season churn stuff while the games are still going on. So that's also a big-time positive for me. And the biggest one is the idea of pooling media rights. Now, I wrote an essay on this on my Twitter yesterday, just because there's a lot of confusion as to what it actually meant, right, and a lot of sort of incorrect assumptions out there. But so here's just basically what the media rights thing is. So for right now, right, conferences negotiate TV deals independently. The SEC is with ESPN, the Big Ten is with Fox, right? So you get Big Noon Kickoff is always at Big Ten games, College Game with ESPN. It does all fit around. It is mostly SEC and Big Ten though. So if those media rights are independent, conference by conference. If you pull them together, that means that conferences will start selling their games together as one individual package, which is kind of what the NFL does, right? So in the NFL, you have CBS, you have Fox, you have NBC. Those three networks, and ESPN. So all those networks, they're advertising the NFL, right? You don't have CBS doing the NFC. You don't have Fox advocating for the AFC. You have all of those networks pushing the NFL as a unified product. So pooling those media rights in college football, it would really stabilize the sport, and it would reduce the financial gaps among different conferences, which will also reduce the need for realignment. So because of that part right there, the SEC has already come out and said they don't want it. That was expected. The Big Ten will also come out and say they don't want it because right now they get more than the lion's share of that revenue because of their TV deals. Pooling it, it wouldn't make it totally even. They would still have an advantage. It would be less of an advantage than it is now over like the ACC and the Big 12. But the good news about that is if you are pro the media rights, the threshold for that to pass, this part of the bill to pass, assuming the bill gets passed, is 75% of FBS schools have to agree. With that percentage, if the entire SEC and the entire Big Ten hold out, you still have 75.4% if everybody else agrees. And I'd imagine that with the exception of maybe like Notre Dame, you would not have a hard time getting everybody else to agree to pulling the media rights. Because it would push the sport, if you pull them, into, rating-based scheduling and national optimization, which is, it's a good thing, but there are some drawbacks to that too, because you'll see, really similar blue bloods in primetime slots, right? If LSU is getting the most eyes, you will see them on, the ABC 7:30 just about every single week. And what also hurts from that is that you'll get even more unequal exposure for G6 programs because the ratings will be lower. So the networks are really not incentivized to, like on a Saturday, put South Florida on ESPN or ESPN2. So that's one of the drawbacks to this. And what it would also do is that it would make the college football playoff like the centerpiece product that everybody is building for, as if they aren't already there. But pulling the media rights would make it even more so. And with that, you would give expansionists more ammo for why you need to push for a larger field. Because, right, if that's the ultimate end goal, you want more teams who are involved in what is the ultimate end goal of the, of the broadcast. So from where I sit, I am in favor of the pooling rights, pooling the rights, because if broadcast companies stop advocating for just their home conferences, you're going to get less division of the sport, on TV, and then therefore you get less division of the sport, at least in a hostile manner, among the fans and just discourse. And in that new world, a playoff bigger than 12 is probably going to be better. I would say we start at 16 instead of jumping straight to 24, just doubling this field. But it would also require a form of centralized governance, which who knows where we're at with that. So, the pooling of the media rights would be a massive change to the sport. In my opinion, it would be a net positive because you get the power conferences all lined up. I sound evil when I say that because it does minimize the G6 a little bit. But in terms of the most important conferences in the sport, those power fours, pooling the media rights would make it would reduce the odds of a super league way more. It would. So hopefully that we do get there. If the whole bill doesn't pass, I do hope that we get media rights pooled regardless. But yeah, so just the overall significance of the Protect College Sports Act as a whole. It would create just a full-on broad framework at the federal level for college athletics and the NCAA and the NIL, which would replace the current state of it, which is no one really knows what it is. And it really just attempts to balance the rights for athletes and their compensation, their health care and their protections, competitive fairness, and just an institutional control over recruiting and tampering, trying to limit all those mistakes. So, like I said in the beginning of this is a bill that we don't even know if it'll actually get passed yet. And if it does, there are going to be tons of amendments. So what I just said will not be how the bill is actually pushed in if it is put out in a few years. But it's a massive story in college sports, and it's a hard one to follow just because not many people want to sit down and read legislature. So hopefully if you listen to this, it was helpful. You were able to get a decent feel for what it's like. But this act, if it is passed in a few years, it would be a massive change to how the sport is run. And in my opinion, it'd be a positive one. So thank you so much for watching this episode of Tailgate Talk SEC. If you do want some more college football preview content, SEC focused every single day up until we kick off in August, subscribe to me here and follow me on Twitter. I've been Will Thomas, and I will see you next time.